All right, welcome back. Now, joining me to continue the discussion on the issue of open grazing is Ahmed Tijani Suleiman, who is the National Secretary General of the AREWA Youth Consultative Forum. Thank you very much, sir, for coming on the program.
Thank you, sir.
What do you make of this whole controversy over the issue of the ban on open grazing?
All right. First of all, I think it's an age-old problem in the sense that grazing is an institution of a particular set of people who, in Nigeria's context, are referred to as herdsmen. It's the herdsmen, the animal husbanders, who actually occupy that environment.
And they've done this for generations.
That is where I was going. And everybody knows if you rear animals, you have to feed them. Grazing is the basic need of the animals if you are in the business. If you are in the business of animal raising, particularly cattle rearing, there's no way you can do without enough grazing land.
But we've seen ranching
in those
some
days.
We've seen ranching in some places.
Yes.
And we had ranches here in the past.
Ranches, grazing spaces or whatever, or the forest or the bush, it all amounts to the same thing.
Okay.
In those days, when Nigeria was not as urbanized as it is today, the issue of land was actually not as heated as it is now. Today, we walk up to a situation where we see space is becoming a problem by the day. I could remember even our grandparents had no problems with grazing, with rearing their animals, because our own domesticity is a very small space compared to the spaces abundantly given to the people whose preoccupation is rearing.
Okay, rearing, yeah.
So they can go here and there, wherever, from one end of Africa to the other. That was no problem. Now this is a story over a century or two. Then suddenly, the 21st century came with its own problems. First, there is the issue of meeting up to the new world order of doing things, from how we live from our own homes and then onto the streets, and how we interact. We have streets where there are a lot of laws today where to crisscross it, to use it, has a lot more rules and regulations governing it, unlike before. I remember when I was growing up, cattle are always on the high roads. And here and there you do have accidents. But on the main, that has been the norm. It almost turned to be part of the aesthetic rural areas. There is no area where you can go and then you cannot see these cattle, goats running up and down in the bushes. But today, there was a sudden need for the authorities to change the situation. Now, let's look at those who are the stakeholders, the Fulanis in Nigeria, like in many other African states. And before I go further, the Fulani have, maybe to their own advantage or disadvantage, they are also linked from one state to the other. You find Fulanis from Cameroon or Niger right into Central Africa and beyond. They are all in form of formal or informal association. They interact, they coordinate. Now, suddenly, the issues of development and state and the other constitutionalities that govern a state now brings in the problems of how we cross into this state and to the next state, that is inter-countries. And then now you have the local one, interstates within the country. Now, before, for years, if you look, there are Fulanis in Enugu, or most of these eastern states, the western states, who are Fulanis, and their main preoccupation is the rearing of cattle. No problem. They lived
but now there's
side
a
by
problem.
side. Suddenly problem comes up. Well, what we are now faced with, politics, unfortunately, instead of mending and consolidating on the social and welfares of citizens, has unfortunately contributed.
But particularly, what do you make of this grazing ban by the
Yes,
Southern
I know.
government?
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. But then you have to give a background, because from my own angle, the AREWA Youth Consultative Forum, we do monitor the activities. We hardly join issues and then be and side without actually taking stocks. We try to be very equitable, and justice has to be the end of the story at the end of the day. Now, we have done our homework to a large extent. As much as we understand those who are calling for the ban of grazing, open grazing, particularly in the southern part of the country, have their own reasons. Because suddenly they are being overrun, and then within that context, skirmishes and sometimes violent interactions of exchanges of gun ending in loss of lives and property. That cannot be condoned with by any system in place. So now, on the other hand, a tradition that has taken place over 100+ years is now being asked to stop, just like that, without any soft landing ground or an option or alternatives that will balance that requirement. Government is found wanting in that respect, because he who fails to plan plans to fail. Unfortunately, my country, Nigeria, and its leadership has failed the people in so many respects, because we saw what you call ranching in the European countries who have advanced.
And we had ranches here in the
And
past.
we have them here in the past. Suddenly they disappeared because of lack of maintenance, lack of foresight and vision. Now, whatever it is government needs to do, it has to bend backwards in all the spheres of influence and rulership as far as the Nigerian citizen is concerned. Every nationality in Nigeria has its right to air and voice his feelings, and he has to be taken seriously, because the Nigerian state is not made up of an entity of a nationality.
So essentially what you're saying is that, look, might not be a bad idea to ban open grazing, but there should be alternatives.
Well, as we went through our investigations, what we came up with, particularly having understood the need for all these governors from these southern states, you cannot take it away from them. If they are accommodating, fine. At the time you accommodate somebody and then he says, today you quit my house, obviously, but then the other story comes in to shackle that. He says, this is Nigeria. I'm a citizen of this country. I have a right to sort my life anywhere. but that should be a condition. Peacefully, without disturbing the host communities you meet. You have to live in accordance with their own ways of life.
Absolutely.
Because you are intruding. But if you're nice, you are a beautiful guest to be protected. Now, in the north, fortunately, I am going to tell the northern leaders that the north is endowed with land, enough land to cater for all these needs and more. How come they are on their knees, almost blind to these requirements? If these industries are taken care of and nurtured, I think they are taxpayers.
And let's also make this very clear that, look, the problem you have between herders and farmers is not just restricted to the south alone. Even in the north, you also have conflict between herders and farmers.
We do have it. I particularly have presided over issues, even getting to the courts, trying to sort it out.
So it's not just a southern problem.
What happens in the north mostly, you find out that in the earlier days, you have these routes where the cattle follow through the bushes and forests and from villages to villages or whatever. Today, they have been usurped by the local authorities, the village district heads and whatever, and they have sold it out. And therefore, at the end, what happens is the routes are now cut off. They cannot pass
those
through.
Grazing routes.
If they have to pass through, they have to pass through farmlands and homes. And obviously, an animal is an animal. You cannot stop an animal from grazing as he's moving along. Now, the herdsman too, obviously, whatever it takes, if his animal is going to eat as he heads it around, all good for him. That is the problem. But if we have entertained the issue of ranching in the modern sense of the word, every state will be struggling to have a ranch of its own, and then
in this
make
case,
capital,
states should provide those ranches.
Yes, capital taxes and revenues will be coming handsomely. But I don't know.
But as we speak, those states are not even providing the ranches.
Now is the problem of the National Assembly to see that happens, goes down to the state assemblies, where the governor will be left without no choice but to obey the bills that is churned out from the House Assembly and the National Assembly. The president there cannot be everywhere, but he himself is subject to directives from the National Assembly. If we have an active and vibrant National Assembly in this country, none of the problems that we are seeing today would have been there. I always end up putting the blame on the National Assembly because they hold all the aces. They are letting the country down. They are letting the electorate down. All of them, without exception, except, of course, we all know the few, very little insignificant few who are up to the task of occupying that space as senators and House of Representative members. Because we can see how the elections take place and we know how they do come into those spaces. So by and large, what I'm saying is there should be a bill coming out ordering every state that has any link or relationship with this cattling thing. Now it is basically the Fulanis. So we are talking about the North. We should not mince our words. Let the northern states take advantage of a situation and make the best out of that situation. It's not a bad situation at all. It's not as if making the best of a bad situation. No, it is taking advantage of a situation for the better. Because if we have our ranches taken care of in the modern way, with a lot of all the sciences involved, I'm sure they will be smiling to the banks and their treasuries, and there will be the envy of other states. And these are opportunities. But for whatever reason, Now the Fulanis, as we now investigated, what we found was even getting out of the southern states is not their major problem. They want this situation where the states, there are various states where they came from. Should take up the mantle of resettling them, giving them spaces and lands, grazing lands, and then secondly, the children they have. There should be a holistic and conscious and deliberate move to get them educated. Get them employable, get them to be able to source their way of living in this modern society we are living. Your child should not be carrying sticks, following the herds in the trailers and whatever, because you are a Fulani. You shouldn't be identified and marked as the person who goes after the cattle day and night, because you are a Nigerian, you have a state, and you leaders are duty-bound constitutionally to look into the matters of your well-being and your future. To that extent, I try now to bring in a situation where if there was a Monday, there is going to be a Tuesday. May God let him rest in peace, continue to rest in peace. I hope President Umaru Yar'Adua did one thing, and nobody should shy away from repeating that 100 folds where problems lie. The Niger Delta was hot, trying the state. Suddenly, whatever it is that came, how it came, whether from the National Assembly or whatever was made, the doctrine of necessity suddenly came into being. Even in the United States, there was nothing like that. But in Nigeria, it happened, and it worked effectively. Unfortunately, what happened in Niger Delta after that is another story. But the intent was genuine. We have seen Niger Deltans being sent abroad for various fields of studies. We have seen monies pumped in. We have seen Ministry of Niger Delta being put in place. Why? Just to pay back the shortcomings that has befallen them, whether deliberately or not. The man took on the gauntlet and said, I'm going to take care of these people and wipe their tears. And this thing should be replicated on other issues. The Fulanis now have been identified as a single entity who are so troublesome, who think bigger than their size, who are so pompous, who are this and that. But what I want the people to understand is that the Fulani man, by his very origin, was somebody who put every kobo he earned or he has into the cattle life. Now you are telling this man, or you are trying to play around with his life, and you want him to stay mute and not react. It's almost impossible. I should die if that is what is expected of me, if I'm to protect. The Fulani man without his cattle is no longer living. People fail to understand that.
But people have also
But government is the one who is to consolidate on that area.
But then there's also the saying that, the cattle is not worth more than the life of a human being.
It is not, it didn't boil down to that. If other things have been taken care of earlier on, a stitch in time, they said save nine. Now, what we are having are the convulsions of the recklessness, negligence of leadership. If somebody now holds Buhari responsible for whatever is happening in this country, he's not being fair to him, because he saw it and he never knew it was that bad. Anybody in Nigeria, we have as they say, 200 million Nigerians. If any single Nigerian will be picked with a closed eye and put in Aso Rock, I don't know whether he's going to do any better. Never mind who it is. But then, Buhari was the one who was there. Now, even at that, we know there are people who are responsible for most of the wars, even in this present dispensation. But that is not an excuse for Buhari to fail. If he failed, he failed. But then, other things, like about 3 or 4 days ago, I heard him go and sit with the president of France. That was something I was looking forward to without me knowing he may go, but I only heard he has gone. But what did they discuss? Nothing that is so important to be discussed other than the insecurity that is being aided deliberately or not deliberately through the French-speaking countries surrounding Nigeria. That also creates more problem than Nigerian government can handle. Because all these call Nigeria senior brother or this and that, but then they now create the roots, they assist one way or the other for Nigeria's problem by day and night. So those are issues you would have pulled on the table.
Unfortunately, we haven't got enough time.
So that is that. But the Fulani people, I hope the doctrine of necessity should be looked into. If it was good when it was given to Niger Delta, then it should be good to be given to the Fulani.
What
we
exactly should they be given? Amnesty or what?
What is they asked if they are going to go back to their homesteads, the state governments must be prepared to provide them.
Exactly.
But then the state governors are definitely not going to start that without somebody standing over them to tell them it has to be done. Who does it? Whether the president says it, but it is the National Assembly who makes sure. Whether it is through a referendum, through the states or whatever.
I guess the state governors, from the
they
north
have
too,
a lot of responsibility.
They are seeing what is happening, and let's just hope they will do something.
If they don't, they are going to come after them, individually and collectively, because Nigerians, especially those who are aggrieved, have already identified who their real enemies are. The leaders, in quotes, the state leaders. These guys, even if they haven't gone to school, because those who haven't gone to school, they are there in every state of the Federation. Whether you are a Yoruba man or an Igbo man, we have them in equal proportion.
Equal proportion.
But then, even that illiterate, so-called illiterate, has a little bit of something that keeps giving him the signal that that is his enemy.
Ahmed Tijani Suleiman, the National General Secretary now of the AREWA Youth Consultative Forum. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much
for sharing your deep insights with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.